ready? We have everybody. We're ready?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Patricia Teffenhart, and I'm the Executive Director for the New Jersey Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or NJCASA. We need look no further than the comments section of any online article written about issues relating to sexual violence to understand why victims and survivors don't come forward. Those who share their stories about harassment and assault in the hopes of shining a light on the issue are often met with angry disbelief, told to suck it up, or it was much worse when I was your age. Survivors are discredited because of the delays in their disclosures, and they, rather than those who have harmed them, often find themselves in the center of public ire that serves to cause others who have not yet come forward to pause, to contemplate, and often retreat to avoid similar re-victimization. Just yesterday on Time.com, I read in horror the terrifying details of the way Susan Fowler's life was impacted by her 2017 blog post, which detailed the rampant sexism and harassment she experienced while working in the Silicon Valley and at Uber. She recounts that on her first day on a new team at work, her new manager sent her a string of inappropriate messages full of sexually suggestive content. She took screenshots of the messages and sent them to HR. In response, she was told by HR and upper management, quote, "Even though this was clearly sexual harassment and he was propositioning me, it was this man's first offense, and they wouldn't feel comfortable giving him anything other than a warning and a stern talking to. Upper management told me that he was a high performer, and they wouldn't feel comfortable punishing him, that it was probably just an innocent mistake on his part." In the days, weeks, and months following that blog post in which she publicly shared all of the above, Ms. Fowler was stalked and followed. Her social media accounts and those of her family were hacked. Private investigators were prying deep into her life, connecting with long-lost contacts, trying to dig up dirt, anything to discredit her, shame her, and silence her. Ask me again why people don't come forward. She wrote, quote, "I've asked myself countless times whether or not I would do it all over again if I truly knew just how bad the bad part of speaking out would be. Speaking up comes at great personal cost. Being a whistleblower is not easy." While Uber has made significant progress since then, both internally and within the ride-sharing app, the changes don't diminish the impact the previous culture had on those who spoke up. But let's be clear. This is a problem that plagues this country from coast to coast. In boardrooms and break rooms, impacting hourly and salaried workers, C-suite executives, and college interns. The problem lies with power and control, the kind that a person exploits to abuse or harm another person, and the kind of power and control that allows them to get away with it and keep the victim silent. Back in the fall, when NJCASA partnered with the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights to hold a series of 3 public regional forums to center the voices of individuals impacted by sexual harassment in workplaces and places of public accommodation, we heard heart-wrenching stories from domestic workers, employees of New Jersey's casino industry, restaurant staff, healthcare providers, frontline service providers that are local domestic and sexual violence service organizations, and those in the legal field. All of them shared horrific stories of misogyny, harassment, and assault. Even individuals who work within organizations with formal reporting structures expressed dissatisfaction with the internal investigatory process. Too frequently, those systems are intended to protect the company from liability rather than to protect their own workers from harm. As Millie Silva, Executive Vice President of 1199 SEIU testified, quote, "This turn the other cheek mentality and culture when it comes to sexual harassment will continue to grow and fester if we allow it to do so." And this is why we're here today. To make clear our intent to expand protections for those working in New Jersey and to strengthen the ways we hold those who cause or allow harm to be held accountable. As has been made very public over the last few years, we have a lot of work to do in New Jersey. We need to clarify the legal gray areas. We need to invest in training. We need to strengthen our policies and expand our statutes of limitations to be more trauma-informed. And we need to support individuals when they come forward. I'm proud to be here with my colleagues across sectors, sharing what we've learned and the steps we're collectively willing to take to make New Jersey safer and more equitable. We do not have any false beliefs that any one action will solve these issues. We cannot legislate our way out of the binds of patriarchal oppression. As long as we continue to value profits over people and powerful white men over everyone else, all that we endeavor to do will be lost. I want to say, though, that I am optimistic. We stand here today as equal partners, willing to do the hard work of unraveling imbalances so that we can all live and work in a safer Garden State. I want to start by thanking my colleagues at NJCASA for holding survivors in the center of their work and for their commitment to systems reform and accountability. I want to thank Rachel Wainer, Director of the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, for asking NJCASA to partner on this important initiative. Rachel and the whole team over at DCR are top-notch professionals who are not afraid to do the hard work necessary to put New Jersey on the right path. I want to thank the Attorney General for consistently being a visionary leader, and thank you to Governor Murphy and his office for bringing us all here today to discuss this important work. And with that, I give you Governor Murphy.
Thank you, Patricia. Really well done. This is in the really hard act to follow category. So thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everybody. Patricia, to you, thanks for your incredible words, and to you and the indispensable team that you work with at NJCASA, thank you for all that you do to make our state safer and better. From the very beginning of our administration, we've been steadfastly committed to fighting inequity and discrimination. That commitment, a reflection of New Jersey's own values, has manifested itself in numerous pieces of legislation. Together with our partners in the legislature, we have worked to create tangible change that truly improves the lives of New Jerseyans, protecting women's health and pay equity, raising the minimum wage and providing earned sick days, reforming record-keeping procedures for equal employment complaints, and creating a hotline for discrimination or harassment. These are the kind of changes that allow our families and our workforce to breathe a little easier. And all of these important and often historic changes are a result of persistent and courageous advocacy. It is not easy to be the voice that speaks out, but I am proud to say that our administration has been listening. In fact, beginning in 2018, we began an in-depth review of sexual harassment policies, including holding hearings on the matter this past September, as Patricia alluded to. During this process, it became clear that our standards were outdated and in need of reform. But today, I am proud to join with Patricia and NJCASA, the Attorney General, Gurbir Grewal, we'll hear from him in a minute, the Chair and CEO of the Civil Service Commission, Deirdre Webster Cobb, the Director of the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, Rachel Wainer, as well as Garden State Equality Deputy Director Alicia DiLorenzo. All of us are here to announce legislation to prevent sexual harassment and create a climate where all people are treated with dignity and respect. Today's legislation, which I am honored to say, this is hot off the press, will be sponsored by Majority Leader Senator Loretta Weinberg, and I salute her and thank her for all of her efforts in this arena as well as so many. Today's legislation clarifies the severe or pervasive standard for establishing a hostile work environment. It makes clear that a single incident alone can create a hostile work environment, and that harassment need not involve physical touching. Far too many people have suffered quietly at their place of work, feeling degraded and let down by the same law that is intended to protect against this intolerable behavior. It is my hope that with these changes, no one will experience this mistreatment again. The legislation also mandates that all private and public employers establish workplace policies and provide training on unlawful discrimination and harassment. Employers with 50 or more employees must collect and report data on workplace discrimination, harassment, and retaliation complaints to the Division on Civil Rights. And we are extending the statute of limitations for cases brought under the law against discrimination from 2 to 3 years, as well as extending the window to file a complaint with the Division of Civil Rights from 180 days to 1 year. And we are adding domestic workers and unpaid interns to the definition of employees covered by this law. What was once too vague and too narrow is now clear and expansive. In addition to the legislation proposal, we're announcing today the Department of Law and Public Safety's Division of Consumer Affairs and gaming enforcement are immediately taking actions that do not require new legislation. The Division of Consumer Affairs will conduct a comprehensive review of how its 51 professional boards, which, by the way, oversees 720,000 active licensed professionals, how those boards address issues related to sexual misconduct by licensees and applicants. The review will include an evaluation of both the questions asked on applications for licensure and current practices for investigating and disciplining licensees accused of sexual harassment or assault. The Division of Gaming Enforcement will propose specific rule changes to combat harassment in the gaming industry. These rules will supplement the legislation advanced today by requiring employers in the gaming industry to conduct more frequent sexual harassment trainings and by requiring the division's approval of anti-harassment policies adopted by employers regulated by the division. The division's rules would complement the legislation advanced today, underscoring that the legislation would, by establishing a floor and not a ceiling on what employers should do to prevent workplace harassment. The behavior we are targeting has gone on for far too long. And while it is clear that our society has entered a season of reflection, reflection without action is of no use to anyone. It has been our intention from the very beginning to set the highest expectations and standards of treating all with dignity and respect. It is not enough for us to say we stand for New Jersey's values if we do not take steps to turn those values into meaningful change. It is therefore our obligation to make sure our workforce is protected from harassment and feels safe and respected no matter where they work or who they work for. And today we have taken another step toward ensuring that standard is upheld. It is now my honor to welcome and bring up the Attorney General of the great state of New Jersey, Gurbir Grewal.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon, everyone. As today's report from our Division on Civil Rights and NJCASA makes clear, sexual harassment remains a shockingly severe, pervasive, and unresolved problem. According to one study cited in the report, 81% of women and 43% of men have experienced some form of sexual harassment during their lifetime. That's simply unacceptable. And that's why all of us have been working tirelessly to address this problem. And 18 months ago, I had the privilege of appointing Rachel Wainer as the director of our Division on Civil Rights. Since day one of her tenure, she's been focused on transforming DCR into a proactive agency, one that uses all of its tools to fight discrimination in all of its pernicious forms. Rachel, thank you for your leadership, and thank you to your team for their incredibly hard work, especially on today's report. But all of us here today also recognize that to truly tackle this issue, we need to hear from the voices of survivors and the voices of those that work with them, our allies in this fight, allies like NJCASA and its executive director, Patricia Teffenhart. Patricia, whether it's pushing back on federal efforts to weaken sexual harassment protections for students or working together to develop best-in-class guidelines for sexual assault investigations, you're an incredible partner. But I especially want to thank you and NJCASA for working with DCR to hold these listening sessions, sessions that have informed the findings and recommendations contained in today's report. I personally attended one of these sessions, and I saw firsthand how they gave voice to survivors who too often feel that they have nowhere else to turn. And in particular, the session that I attended shed light on the challenges faced by our domestic workers, who are not protected by New Jersey's strong law against discrimination, and who may also be less likely to report their abuse to authorities, either out of concern about their immigration status or for other reasons. In this way, today's report illuminates how sexual harassment is especially prevalent at the intersection of identities. Simply put, the report's recommendations are transformative and would make New Jersey a leader in combating sexual harassment. But recommendations alone are meaningless unless you have someone willing to act on them, to help make them a reality. So, Governor, I want to thank you for your strong leadership on this issue and for taking prompt and decisive action on this report. The legislative amendments outlined in the report and being proposed today will establish strong workplace standards for public and private employers, standards that will help ensure workplaces, safe workplaces for New Jersey's diverse and inclusive workforce. But today's efforts are only part of the work that we've been doing at the AG's office when it comes to this issue. From locking up sexual predators to seeking the licenses of doctors who sexually assault their patients, we're working hard to combat sexual assault and sexual harassment. But we also know that there's much more to be done. And we realize that we have many tools at our disposal, and we're committed to using all of them, both proactively and creatively. That's why 2 years ago, our Division of Criminal Justice worked with many stakeholders, including NJCASA, to not only update the guidelines that apply to sexual assault investigations, guidelines that had not been touched in more than a decade, but also to make them binding on our law enforcement agencies. And that's also why last year we asked our Division on Civil Rights to undertake the efforts that culminated in today's report and legislative proposals. And that's why this year we asked our Division of Consumer Affairs and our Division of Gaming Enforcement to think about ways in which they could use their tools to fight sexual harassment and assault. And as the Governor shared, those divisions and their respective directors are here this afternoon, Paul Rodriguez of Consumer Affairs and Dave Rebuck of Gaming. They both stepped up. First, our Division of Consumer Affairs is conducting a top-to-bottom review of how every professional board it oversees addresses allegations of sexual misconduct by licensees and applicants to ensure that the professional boards, which license everyone from doctors to plumbers to massage therapists, take allegations of sexual misconduct seriously, identify where it has occurred, and respond to it appropriately. And that can mean revoking or suspending an existing license, or in some cases even denying a new one. And it could also mean making referrals to other appropriate authorities. Second, our Division of Gaming Enforcement will be proposing rules to address workplace harassment in the gaming industry, an industry that has a long history of such harassment. When adopted, these rules will give our department additional tools to enforce workplace anti-harassment policies in New Jersey's casinos. We look forward to working with Governor Murphy, Senator Weinberg, and all those standing with us this afternoon as we continue to work together to combat sexual harassment and workplace harassment in New Jersey. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you so much, Gerbir, for those remarks and for everything. In addition to Dave and Paul, I also want to give Reva Foster a shout out in from Burlington County, who leads so impressively NJ BIC. And bless you, Reva, for everything you do. First Lady of the great state of New Jersey, Tammy Murphy's in the house, representing Brothers and Sisters in Organized Labor. Barry Kushner's with us. And to all of you, welcome again. It's now my honor to introduce someone who's already been referred to, I think, by all three speakers with good reason, because she does an extraordinary job, period, but in particular in this arena. Please help me welcome Rachel Wainer, after the Director of the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming together. Even as women make up nearly half of the workforce, sexual harassment persists in every sector of the economy. And it persists in housing and places of public accommodation as well. Sexual harassment is about power. It affects people regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, disability, national origin, or immigration status. However, because it is fueled by power imbalances, marginalized communities, especially people with intersecting identities, are often uniquely vulnerable to sexual harassment. And existing power disparities then keep survivors from reporting. The lack of reporting has meant that for too long, sexual harassment has been ignored, overlooked, and normalized. New Jersey as a state had not yet reviewed its laws and policies with a view towards better preventing sexual harassment in the workplace, in housing, and in places of public accommodation. So we at the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, in partnership with the New Jersey Coalition Against Sexual Assault, which we could not have done this without, hosted a series of public hearings around the state to hear from victims of sexual harassment and experts regarding how laws, how policies, and how culture need to change. We began planning the hearings in earnest last spring and held all 3 in September. Our goals were to learn from people's lived experiences and to give voice to survivors around the state, and to uncover the depth and breadth of the problem, because we cannot hope to fully address a problem that we don't fully understand. So at the 3 public hearings, as well as in written comments, we heard from more than 40 survivors, advocates, and experts from all over the state. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to all who provided testimony. Their courage in sharing their stories and their recommendations led directly to this report and the legislation that is being announced today. We look forward to working with the Attorney General, the Governor, the Legislature, Senator Weinberg, and NJCASA to turn these recommendations into law. If anything, additional reporting since our hearings only reinforces that the time to act is now.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much for everything, especially for the work that's led to today. Please, it does take a village. We know you need legislative sponsors and leadership. You need extraordinary work that took months and close to a year, and you need multiple departments of government to make happen what we're talking about making happen today, and that includes the Civil Service Commission. Please help me welcome its chair and CEO, Deirdre Webster Cobb.
Good afternoon. The Civil Service Commission is excited about this new and very timely initiative to ensure workplace protections, and we are committed to enhancing our policies and procedures to ensure inclusion and equity for all state employees, regardless of sex, race, gender identity, or any other protected category. Our Division of Equal Employment Opportunity and Affirmative Action oversees implementation of the state policy prohibiting discrimination and harassment in the workplace, which applies to all state departments, agencies, and employees, as well as to contractors who do business with the state and applicants who apply for employment with the state. It is a zero-tolerance policy based on the requirements of the law against discrimination. We are committed to improving the workplace culture for all state employees and will not tolerate an unacceptable or toxic work environment. Employees and managers have the right to work in a workplace free of discrimination and harassment, and in an environment that demonstrates their employer will adhere to the laws and policies that prohibit discrimination and harassment in the workplace. The importance of a state policy that fosters a workplace culture that effectively responds to the needs of the civil service workforce cannot be understated. Policies are only effective if they are communicated, understood, and followed. Over the last 2 years, the Civil Service Commission has worked diligently to update its policies and training to respond to the changing workplace culture. We welcome any new initiatives that recommend changes that will provide additional protections to the civil service workforce. Thank you, Governor, and we are ready to stand with you in implementing these new changes.
Thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, Deirdre, for this and for everything you do. We have what we believe is the most diverse American state and one of the most diverse places on the planet. Which means when you talk about the legislation that we're speaking to today and the executive actions that we're taking, it touches all corners of our state, all walks of life. And in that spirit, we have another great partner with us today, and that's Garden State Equality. Please help me welcome its Deputy Director, Alicia DiLorenzo. Alicia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I stand here with deep gratitude for the individuals who shared their stories to lift up this important work in our state, for the energy and personal investment DCR and NJCASA and Rutgers put behind the creation of this report, for the governor and elected officials who supported and endorsed this legislation, for Senator Weinberg for her steadfast contributions to move this work forward, and for men like Attorney General Grual, who stand as leaders that will take us toward a new reality where accepting egregious acts of harassment is no longer acceptable. Months ago, after meeting here in Trenton, I walked down the street to my car with a few folks from DCR and learned about the work happening across the state to address sexual harassment. I was moved by the stories they were collecting and the spotlight they were shining on this issue. As a licensed therapist, stories from clients over my years in practice flooded my mind. And even more visceral in that moment was the reminder of how this experience seeps into every area of an individual's life. Because the negative effects of sexual harassment don't just end when you close the office door. It spreads into the way you're able to engage in everyday life, with your friends, with your family, with your children. It impacts the way you see the world and the way you see yourself in the world. It affects your sleep, your appetite, your mood. And we know the mental health risks associated with this trauma includes feelings of panic and anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. And at the same time that I was moved by the work of DCR and NJCASA, I was also immobilized. It was not lost on me as an educator and an educated woman to have experienced and endured the harmful and demoralizing effects of sexual harassment in the workplace. It had been over a decade that I had lived these same experiences at the intersection of my identity as a lesbian woman. It had been over a decade after I stood up to an institution and culture that leaves women feeling unheard and unseen when they have the courage and dare to speak their truth. And yet I held back in that moment in sharing my own contribution when asked for submissions of narratives. So this is a full circle moment for me. Speaking our truth is the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal. And while the issue transcends every race, religion, culture, political affiliation, and every workplace, it has happened to men and women, heterosexual and cisgender, transgender, to athletes, to executives, to lawyers, to secretaries and soldiers and scientists, teachers, nurses, domestic workers, farmers, healthcare providers, and politicians. It doesn't have to continue. This says something about the respect gap that exists in our culture and our relational equality to one another. The systemic behavior of the workplace is a microcosm of our socioeconomic fabric. The answer is in a cultural shift where there is greater willingness for all of us to come into power in new ways that does not strip people of their humanness. It means coming from a place of connection versus isolation and power. It is why Garden State Equality is committed to stand with DCR, NJCASA, the governor, and the Attorney General's office to expand this work and commitment to create safe places for everyone. I am proud to live in a state and get to contribute to the work being done to put action behind healing our society. Today marks an important day in New Jersey's history. Together, we are pulling back the curtain on a culture of toxic masculinity, stained by the privileged and those in power, that has existed for far too long. It is my hope that this legislation is a redeeming promise, not only to the silenced and marginalized voices who will rise as survivors of sexual harassment and discrimination, but for those who have bore witness to such atrocities in the workplace, to know that the time has come to take action, for it will no longer be acceptable to turn a blind eye to such injustices again. Thank you.
Really impressive, Alicia. Really impressive. Wow. Thank you very much, Alicia. I think that's it, right? We'll take a couple of questions. Anybody? Please.
Quick question, actually, for both you and your team. Your thoughts on the president's decision to take border guards and bring them into San Francisco? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we both, I'll give you my thoughts, and I know the Attorney General will give you his. We don't agree with it. We think, I'll speak for myself, this is politics. This is not a decision based on the data. There are sort of two worldviews of how you keep people safe job number one for me as governor is the safety and security of all residents in this state. And I've said this before, are we nice people? I think we are. Are we on the empathetic side of life? We are. But this is also cold-blooded. And the data supports the fact that when folks have the courage to come out of the shadows into sunlight, engage their neighbors, their faith leaders, their elected officials, and most importantly, law enforcement, you have a safer community and a safer state. I know Mayor Baraka believes that. I know I believe it, and I know this guy believes it, who's going to give you his own perspective.
I think it creates a culture of fear that undermines public safety, period.
Well said. Tom.
Excuse me, too, on this topic. Do you apologize, Governor, personally to any of the women who complained about the toxic workplace on your campaign, specifically Julie Reganski? And I also wanted to ask, you separated from Adam Alonzo based on the accusations in Milwaukee. Will there be any similar consequence for men on your team who have been accused of mistreating women, specifically Joe Kelly or Brandon Jones?
On the first, I've apologized as a general matter to anyone who didn't see things the way that we saw it. And we've committed to having an even stronger society as we're discussing today. And certainly any campaign that we're a part of going forward, we hope to be able to set not just a New Jersey standard and record, but a national, if not global record. And separately, I've had no interactions with Adam and since he departed his Milwaukee.
The question was, so you're saying you didn't apologize to any of these women personally. I wonder why not?
We I think have said, Tom, and we've said it time and again to you privately as well as publicly, we're sick of we're right, you're wrong. The fact of the matter is if someone has that perception, whoever they may be, we have made a general and heartfelt and genuine apology. Please. That's all I've got to say on that. Nikita, do you have your hand up? Or?
Yeah. So you actually brought up Marcus before I did today, but I was wondering, have you made a decision on eliminating organization from Marcus? Do you support that?
I've not. I've actually not had any conversations other than since the last time you asked me the question.
So, I mean, it's been 2 weeks and lines are already being awarded.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of when?
Listen, I am personally neutral as it relates to who our nominee is for the president. But I'm not neutral about who the president should be. I promise you that I will lay myself across the tracks regardless of who our nominee is. Please, that's all I got there. Sorry. Matt, I guess, and I didn't see Charlie there, so I was going to give seniority there, but I.
Work environment. And there's documented cases of people who are currently in your orbit. We know that Adam is no longer in your orbit, but there's people currently in your orbit. There's documented cases of people treating toxic work environments. So are you saying that you're not taking any action against?
Matt, every time anyone raises today or any time in the future, any concerns whatsoever about workplace conditions, every single time those concerns have been taken seriously, they've been addressed, and they've been run to ground. And that'll continue to be the case. Charlie.
Following up, you said you lay down on the track for a nominee whenever that comes. What is your reaction to Democrats who are quickly lining up behind Mike Bloomberg's candidacy, including a growing number of African Americans? And do you think it's wise for the Democratic Party to stand behind a
I will say this, we've had very constructive dealings since the moment we got here, in fact, since the campaign, with his people, both in the environment and in gun safety in particular. I want to give a shout out on that.
Just to be clear, so you don't have any plans to fire or separate with anyone else?
I have literally nothing else to add, Brett. Thank you.
The Boy Scouts have declared bankruptcy, citing the
I saw that, yeah.
assault case against them. In New Jersey, it opened its window last year. Many people sued under that law, saying that because they were headquartered here for a long time, they could sue them for abuse that occurred anywhere. Do you have any sense of whether that law has an impact on this, or any reaction to the news, or whether the Attorney General is planning any action similar to what happened with clergy hotline on this?
I don't have any insight whatsoever. I'll ask Kabir if he's got anything he wants to add.
So when we stood up the clergy abuse hotline, it was for all forms of institutional abuse to include anyone who's been victimized, whether it's the Boy Scouts, whether any house of worship or any denomination. And we're not turning away individuals who bring criminal allegations to our attention. We run out everything fully. and that's what we'll continue to do until we issue a report specific to the clergy.
Michael and Brendan, then we're going to shut down.
Part of the remarks on this topic, it was mentioned that the processes for handling sexual assault cases were changed a couple of years back. I was wondering if we're certain that those processes are being followed and what the real world impact has been.
You know, I think we changed those guidelines, issued them in November of 2018. And I would say that they're best in class, and it was a 2-year process that Patricia, NJCASA, and others participated in. We issued a law enforcement directive making them binding on all law enforcement agencies to include police officers and our prosecutors. So if anyone is not abiding by those guidelines, they should make it known to our office or to their local police departments or county prosecutors. But I think we've created a victim-centered culture. We've adopted best-in-class guidelines to make sure that we run out and treat all allegations seriously and offer all manner of services that are available to us. And I'm hopeful by changing the culture around receiving complaints and investigating them that more people are feeling comfortable coming forward to law enforcement. I can't share with you the numbers right now, but that's something that we are trying to do a deep dive into to see if reporting and prosecutions have increased after the November 2018 guidelines were issued. And I think that's something we'll look at and we'll continue to refine moving forward. We have the Governor's Coalition Against Sexual Violence that participated in that process. That is a mechanism to receive additional comments, suggestions to improve how we're operating, and we'll continue to receive and look at ways in which we can make this better for victims.
I would just say you referred to Patricia and NJCASA, and I'd say the same thing about Garden State Equality. You know, no matter how good an idea you might have, no matter how talented you might be, you need a whole. As I said earlier, it takes a village, not just within government, but I don't know where we would be, Patricia, in particular in this arena today, without you and your team, and in so many ways, Alicia, with you, without you and your team, extraordinary. Brenda, you had one.
One more try. It's promulgating rules and training, but for people who come forward and do make complaints, there seems to be no consequences. There's no repercussion. Again, can you address, are there going to be any plans to deal with Julie and other people who have come forward?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on any specific situation, but believe me, there are repercussions if people are found to have violated whatever the code of conduct is. And I think our job is to, and we've been on this mission for a couple of years now, our job is to make New Jersey the safest place one can be, whether you're a survivor, a victim, whether or not, regardless of the perpetration. And today's another step. These are, as my colleagues remind me, these are all pieces in a bigger puzzle. And today is this is a big step today. I don't think at the end of the day we're going to have any state in America that can come close to what we will have on the books. And our objective is to not just have that as a statement in government, but as across the board, including in the private sector, gaming, consumer affairs, et cetera. So that's it. Tom, I'll get you. Let's say, Catherine, you go. I don't have any update. Deirdre, do you? No update. Can we come back to you? I want to thank my colleagues standing with us today. Deirdre and Patricia, thank you so much. Kabir, Rachel, Alicia, thank you so much for everything you did, not just for today, but in this broader context. Thank you all for being with us.